Good morning. It is September 19th, 2020. I'm Raymond Richard Neutra, the youngest son of Richard Neutra, the architect, and I'm interviewing Keith Chase, a friend of mine,
Good
who
morning.
aunt and uncle in the early 1940s built the Charles and Sybil Maxwell House. Uh, at, at the end of Sybil's life, Keith was responsible for her and the house. And so I'd just like him to tell us a little bit about that. And then he's going to give us a PowerPoint explaining who these people were and the role of the house in their life and also the fate of the house.
Well, my aunt, of course, after her husband passed away, uh, carried on in the house for several years, teaching her violin students. And age finally caught up with her, and she began to have some issues trying to keep her accounting straightened out, much less managing the house, and things started to deteriorate. So she contacted me and asked me if I would give her a hand in helping her out. So I did, and that was in the late 1990s, somewhere around 96, 95, 96, somewhere along in there. I slowly but surely took over helping her with her affairs until she got to a point finally where her dementia took over and we had to move her into a retirement community because she was unable to take care of herself at all.
Okay, Doc, tell us about the Maxwells.
Well, it's a wonderful memory. I, of course, remember Charles and Sybil very well through my very young years. And right up until the very end, we used to celebrate our holidays, usually Christmas Eve, with my aunt and uncle, Charles and Sybil. And we would always go over to the house on Bowling Green Way and have a wonderful Christmas party with the family. And sometimes if you invited friends, extras came along to the parties as well. And it was always a musical event. We always sang Christmas carols, and Sybil usually played her violin, and my dad played his tin can cello a little bit, which I'll tell you more about later. And I played the piano, and we always had a good time together.
Great. Okay, do you want to show us your PowerPoint?
Okay, let's see if we can get this going right now. I have to go to share screen, which we're going to do now. And then I say share. And then I have to click over here from the beginning and open up the screen, full screen. There we go.
Great.
Now we're all set with a nice clear screen. So this is the title slide, 475 North Bowling Green Way. That's the street address in West Los Angeles, Brentwood area, where the house was located. So a brief family history. I'll talk about my uncle Charles first, and then I will talk about my aunt Sybil. Charles Maxwell, his official name changed to Maxwell on the 27th of February in 1931. His original name was Carl Max Schneefus. His other names in the early years was Charles Max Schmidt and Charles M. Smith when he actually came to the United States. His parents were Max Schneefus and his mother was Ida Schneefus. So Mama Ida and Papa Schneefus. I even remember those folks during our Christmas celebrations when they had immigrated to the States. So my Uncle Charles was born in October 25th of 1892 in Leipzig, Germany. And he passed away in Los Angeles, fairly young age, August 30, 1962. I'm sorry, August 20th, 1962 in LA. And he and Sybil today are buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery. So the interesting thing about my Uncle Charles was that his education was at the Royal Conservatory in Leipzig and his at the University of Music and Theater, and it was incidentally founded by Felix Mendelssohn in 1843. And he studied composition with a rather famous person, Max Reger, who was a well-known composer and organist and a pianist. Well, my uncle, for whatever reason, decided to immigrate to the United States at an early age. He was only 19 on the 23rd of March in 1911. And of course, things progressed in his early days. I really don't know much about his early days in the United States, except to know that he ended up in the US military and I have his discharge papers. He was discharged May 28th in 1918. So after he emigrated to the States, because of his musical background and all, he found himself in the theater district in New York. And all of the records say that he became an arranger for various orchestras while he was in New York. Later on, after he'd met my Aunt Sybil, he moved to Los Angeles in 1929 and became a musical arranger at MGM Studios and other studios as far as that goes. And as the film industry progressed and they got out of talkies and into sound motion pictures, my Uncle Charles found himself being requested to compose music for some of the early talkie films as background music. So that actually then became my uncle's primary employment, if you will, was composing music for musical scores for motion pictures. And ASCAP today has registered over 315 different compositions in the registry of films that he composed music for.
What is ASCAP?
Association of, well, it's, I'm sorry, I can't recall the exact words, but it's an association of all musicians who join that organization and register music with them. So it's always copyrighted and they get royalties for all of their music. So it's an association basically to protect their compositions and make sure that they get the proper royalties. It's a very strong organization, and almost all musicians that compose any music are members of ASCAP today. So just to finish the story on my uncle's side, he met my aunt in New York in the theater business there, and they got married in 1926, March the 2nd, at Port Chester, New York, and I have their marriage license from that. And he finally got his US citizenship on May 22nd, 1931. So those are just some statistical numbers about my Uncle Charles. And this is actually I went to Google and I found this. This is the actual conservatory in Leipzig as it looks today, where my uncle went to school. And that's Max Rieger at an organ at the conservatory. I managed to get that picture out of Google as well. Now, a brief similar story about my aunt, Sybil Maxwell. She was born and named Sybil Rosalie Chase. Her father was Herbert Harrison Chase. Her mother was Myrtle Clara Peterson Chase. And she had three brothers, Herbert Percival Chase, who was born October 29th in 1900. Herbert Percival Chase is my father. Theodore Lawrence Chase was born March 30th in 1906, and William Stephen Chase was born May 9th of 1913. And Sybil was born April 1st of 1903. And she and my father were both born at 93 Pleasant Street in Brockton, Massachusetts, in the house. And as I said earlier, she passed away on May 2nd of 1998 and is buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery, where my Uncle Charles is as well. So her father, Herbert Harrison, was an attorney in Brockton, Massachusetts. And her mother, Myrtle, was a musician, composer, organist, and harpist. And she had some failing health issues living back there on the East Coast. And she finally convinced her husband to move the whole family to California, and they settled of all places in San Bernardino, California. And they moved there and bought their first place in 1905, December the 18th. Herbert Harrison set up a new law practice in San Bernardino, and later the family moved to Los Angeles, finally getting out of San Bernardino. And unfortunately, Herbert passed away at an early age in 1917. And this was a devastating situation because the family were plunged into a real tough financial situation. And my dad, Herbert Percival, was about 17 at the time of his father's passing. And he had to go to work and help support the family. And he fortunately just barely got through high school when he went to work for the Santa Fe Railway. So Sybil was age 14 when her father passed away, and her mother continued to instruct her in music and started a musical teaching school in her home to support herself and the family. So Sybil decided that it was time for her to move on, and so around age 17, she left California to seek her fortune in New York, in the musical world back there, and started playing her violin on stage. She got into Broadway stage shows as a performing artist, and later, somewhere along the way, she met Charles Maxwell while performing in the theater. And she and Charles were married on the 2nd of March in 1926. So those are some numbers and interesting history about the family. So Brockton, Massachusetts, where the Chase family started, that's the old firehouse. And you notice I got this off of Google, some horse-drawn carriages out there. This was what it really looked like in the early days when my aunt and my father were born back there. And actually, thanks to Google again, that is a picture of the house, 93 Pleasant Street, as it looked back then. That's what it looks like today, another Google picture. So people have really nicely maintained the old place. It doesn't look like it's as old as it really is. It's all painted up so nice there. So my grandmother, Myrtle, this is a picture of her music room in Brockton, Massachusetts. There are a number of interesting things in there that we still have as memorabilia. There's a music cabinet over there in the corner, which I still have today. I have the picture right above it. And there's another picture in the far right-hand corner that you can't see in this picture, but I also have those old pictures. So there she is sitting in her music room with her harp nearby. And here she's sitting at her harp, and you can see the picture above it. I still have that picture, as you can see today. Now, one interesting thing, you'll notice the piano. The piano is got a pedal board at the base. You can just barely see it in the lower right-hand corner. And that's where she practiced with her feet, the footwork for playing the organ. And I remember seeing that piano in the house for years and years and years once they moved to Los Angeles. So it's a very interesting piano. I've never seen anything quite like that since. Now, when they were in Brockton, this is what my grandfather's office looked like, Herbert Harrison. He's sitting at his desk. You notice the crank-up telephone hanging on the wall, gas lights in the office, and his secretary in the back office there, and the law books in the bookshelf. So that's how life was back in the early 1900s for the Chase family. When they moved to Los Angeles, here is an actual old Model A. I double-checked, it is not a Model T, it is a Model A. I went to Ford to double-check. You can tell by the hood or the number of slots in the hood ornament there that it's definitely a Model A. And that's sitting in front of the house that they lived in Los Angeles. Here she is at her home in Los Angeles, playing the harp, and you can just barely see a corner of Sybil sitting on the couch next to her. Well, as I said, Sybil moved to New York and got into the stage, and boy, you could see she was really into the theatrics in those days, and she really had a lot of fun. Here's another picture of her here. Now, I never saw any of these pictures until we were cleaning up the house after she had passed away. And we discovered all of these old photographs buried in a cabinet. And so it was fun to go through all of these. And Sybil never really talked about those early days when she was on stage in New York. And that was, of course, taken before she ever met Charles. And she met some interesting characters along the way. These are some of the stage characters. This fellow's name is Charlie Greenway. I don't know who he is, but that's the kind of characters that were on stage in those old vaudeville days back in New York. Here's a romantic looking character from one of the shows back there. I don't know what his name was. There was no name on the picture. Again, this is one of those pictures that was buried in the cabinet when I discovered all this after her passing. Now, when she moved to Los Angeles later on with Charles, this was still the last days of the silent films. This was in the late 20s. And Charlie was starting to get involved with music in the industry there. And she was employed in the theater, in the film studio there, to play background music to set a mood for the actors. And you notice the film camera there, it's even got a hand crank. That's before electric motors came along to drive the cameras. Another scene, similar idea, where she's setting the mood with some other musicians, playing her violin along with a cellist and a keyboardist there, and some of the staff observing her there. You can see again, here's a director talking to one of the actresses and the mood music setting there on a set. Another similar scene. And of course, even out in the field, they were doing some Western style movies, and you can see all of the actors and the movie cameras, and even my aunt playing her violin in the lower right-hand corner there. Ramon Navarro, one of the really heartthrobs of the early days of those films. And so he wrote a little note to her. You can see on the collar of his shirt there, his signature, and a note to my aunt.
Can I just interrupt you here?
Yeah.
I noticed in the picture of her mother and her, where she's down in the corner, that she's dressed with some kind of a headdress. And it suggests to me that both her mother and her were kind of artsy people, a little bit, little less conventional maybe than a serious lawyer father. And then the other thing that I notice is that Ramon Navarro is calling her Miss Sybil Chase, so that suggests that maybe that she was even doing some movies back in New York before she married Charles, or maybe she just kept her name as Sybil Chase even when she was married.
Well, I honestly don't know the final detail on that because, of course, that all happened before I was born. And that history, I think you could read several ways, and I guess we'll have to leave it up to our imagination to decide which was the best way. She did carry that name back east. And of course, she didn't change her name till Maxwell until after Charles, for sure, had changed his name. And all of that happened in the 20s. So it's a period of time when there isn't much history that I could find to really clarify exactly when some of these things took place. But yes, definitely, my grandmother was kind of strange in the way she dressed and her mannerisms. I remember meeting her for the first time at her home when I was about 4 years old. I'm sure I met her before that, but I can only recall seeing her for a few times when I was about 4 years of age. And then she passed away somewhere around 1936 or 37, somewhere along in there.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that Sybil, as an adult, was very much involved with the Anthroposophical Society, something that Rudolf Steiner, people who were devotees of the philosopher Rudolf Steiner. And to me, that suggests that maybe she would be the one to uh, be interested in the unconventional architecture that my father uh, offered. Because when they arrived in 1929, they would have been reading in the newspapers about his Level Health House, which was opened at the end in December of 1929, and 10,000 people came to see this house because its owner, Philip Lovell, wrote a popular column on vegetarianism and healthy living. Um, and so they would have been aware of the very beginning of my dad's career and only commissioned him about a decade later in the early 40s.
Well, she became more involved with the Anthroposophical Society as she got older, for sure. I don't know much about her early years in terms of that philosophy or when she acquired it, but certainly in her latter years, she was very involved with the Los Angeles branch of the Anthroposophical Society. She chaired various committees, was an officer in the organization, and right down to the end of the line, she was very active. In fact, we held her final memorial at the Anthroposophical Society headquarters in Pasadena upon her passing. So I know she was very interested in that. And she went to, oh dear, where is it in Germany? The name of the city where Steiner had his headquarters escapes me right now. Anyway, she was a devout anthroposophist. So anyway, as things progressed, she got into chamber music. And here she is with a group playing chamber music. And now starts the interesting story. She met through the chamber music, whoops, jumped one ahead there. And this was Alfred Niederman and his wife Lily. And as it turns out, Alfred was the father of Dione, who became Raymond's mother, Dione Neutra. So next picture here, that is Dione playing a cello in the family home. And so obviously there was an interesting connection in chamber music between Dione and my Aunt Sybil.
And probably Alfred, who was a pianist and had chamber music concerts in that apartment, the Strathmore apartment that you're showing. So
they certainly did. And that's how I think the big connection to your father came about, was because there was an event apparently in that apartment when my aunt and uncle were invited to attend, and they immediately fell in love with the interior design. This is a picture that I obtained about the interior, and they loved the clean lines, the high ceiling comparatively, and so they found out that this had been designed by Richard Neutra. And so they thought, oh boy, we'd sure love to have a house like that. So that's how it all started. And at that point in time, they already owned a home over in Los Angeles on Bowling Green Way. And this is a picture of Bowling Green Way, the beautiful magnolia trees. And that is a picture of the house that they originally owned on Bowling Green Way, and it had a vacant lot next door. So that's the situation when they visited the Strathmore Apartments and fell in love with Richard Neutra's design. There's a picture of Richard, and I guess that's your mother, isn't it, Raymond?
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And there's your dad, and there you are, Raymond, young kid. And there's some nice pictures of your family together. Let's see, go to left to right there, Raymond. Who's who there?
So the middle brother, Dion, who became an architect. I'm the little kid looking up at my dad. My oldest brother, Frank, who is on the autistic spectrum, and my mother, Diona.
And there's your dad. So when my aunt and uncle decided that they wanted to have Richard design a house for them, this was in the late 30s, I think around 1939, 1940, that they had Richard design the house, knowing that they had a lot that they could put it on. So this is a sketch of the actual layout. It was 1,700 square feet. And the key point of that whole house was the wonderful large living room. As you can see there in the lower right, it was a big living room with a little alcove there, and then the dining area just above it. And then off to the left there, you can see the kitchen and the service porch. And then, of course, because my aunt was teaching violin, she had a room there called the practice room, where she could have her students come in through a side yard entrance into the practice room, and she could teach her students there. There was a bathroom in the middle, and then the master bedroom on the right. So it was a very simple home, nice two-car garage on a very nice large lot.
Where was the piano in the house? Where would that have been?
Right. If you're looking at in the living room, and you down to the lower left there, you see sort of a little alcove. Above it is the entry. So the alcove is in the left is where the desk sat. And if you just move off to the right, that's where the piano sat. And I have photos to show you that in more detail when we get to the next slide or two here. Oh, one other point. One of the features in that house was the wonderful fireplace. And you can see that over on the right. And I'll mention it now and I'll show you later. There's a little cupboard right next to the fireplace. And that's where the wood could be stored. And what was interesting about it and unique was the fact that you could open the door from the garden and put the wood logs into the cabinet and then access that cabinet from the living room by opening another door and pull the logs out as needed and place them in the fireplace. So what it meant is you never had to have the logs stacked in a cradle next to the fireplace and or have to carry them in from outside on a rainy day. So that was really handy, and my uncle used that all the time. He loved the fireplace. He had lots of fires there. Whenever we had a holiday gathering, there was always a nice fire in the fireplace. So this is the early days when the house had just been constructed in 1941 and completed. These photos Raymond managed to acquire for us. And this is what the house looked like from the front yard. There's another view from the main entrance. This is a view of the living room looking towards a large sliding door out into the backyard. And an interesting table that I'll show you more details about in a few minutes, which sits in the dining area there. There's the fireplace that I was telling you about. There's another view of the dining table in the living room. A nice view of the backyard looking at the house and a wonderful fireplace chimney. In later years, this is back in the 1997 era. Excuse me. This is what the house looked like, with a lot of foliage all around the house, lots of trees and shrubs. This is that dining table we talked about. You notice it's all set up, and I had the candelabra today, as a matter of fact, here. That candelabra came way back from Brockton, Massachusetts, and it's still in existence after all these years. Now that's that dining table again, but you notice it's lowered down. Now this next picture will show you how it worked. The legs were on hinges. My wife is actually there with pulling on the lever that locks it in place, but that really made it a very unique table. So when you wanted to, you could lower the table down, make a wonderful coffee table out of it, or with a little effort, you could set it up and make a nice dining table. And I remember having wonderful meals every holiday season at that table. Just a nice casual living room, not fancy, but just very comfortable. And they always had a dog. They always had German Shepherds. So I don't have a photo in any of these pictures of the German Shepherds, but they had at least 3 or 4 different German Shepherds while I was around in those early days.
It looks like a cork floor there.
No, that's just the carpet you're looking at.
Well, no, the tiles there look to me like cork tiles.
Well, we'll take another view of another. This is. I'm not sure if we can show that or not. I think you're right, Raymond, because this is the desk area and the niche, which acted as an office and also a place where my uncle spent quite a bit of time working on his music. And that is a hardwood or a hard floor there. And I guess you're right. That could very well have been a cork floor, but I can't tell you that for sure. And there's the piano. Here you can see, I think in the background there, you can see the office there. There's a floor, and then there's carpet here. Anyway, that's the piano, the Steinway, that I still have that piano here today in the house. And that's where my uncle did all of his music composing. He would sit at the keyboard. He had a drafting table adjacent to it. And he would sit there with a script. And that's a photo of my Uncle Charles. And let's see, at this point, we're going to, oh, heck, hang on a second. Let me hit the start button here. Thing went off again. Sorry, this decided to shut down again. We're almost there. This is about where I wanted to start the music. So now we're going to have a little musical background. And this is the actual music that we're going to be playing. Let's see if it's... I'm trying to think why this isn't coming. Are you getting it in there at all?
I am.
Well, you are hearing it. Okay. Okay, that's good. This is the music that this background came from. And one of our local residents here actually played the piano for us. And the actual cut of music is called While Africa Sleeps. It lasts for roughly 5 minutes or so. And hopefully that will time out just about right with the rest of this presentation. Anyway, that's a photo of my Uncle Charles. And this is the tools of his trade. He had a script. He had some good soft pencils and a stopwatch. And he would sit there at his drafting board, read the script, tinkle a tune or two on the piano, and start writing on composition on paper. He wrote, as I say, some over 315 different compositions. Again, almost all of the music had to do with films, although he did enjoy writing certain music for various instrument ensembles over the latter part of his years as a composer. So he had quite a variety of music, but most of his stuff was in heavy-duty orchestration. That was a picture of my Aunt Sybil probably in the mid-60s. And she really enjoyed her teaching. She had some wonderful students, some who actually did quite well in the career. One in particular was the young man, Kenneth Yerke, who eventually, and is today, a violinist in the film industry, where they do recordings for films. They have the score, they rehearse it once, and then they play it. So you have to be very talented to be able to pick up a piece of music, go through it once, and then play it flawlessly and actually have it recorded. So he won a number of awards as a young man, and then he took a master class at USC with Jascha Heifetz, and that was really quite an accomplishment to be recognized and have some wonderful tips by Heifetz. So that point was, that in many ways was the high point for my aunt's career, when she had one of her students work with Heifetz. These are some photos of our family gatherings at the house there on Bowling Green. My dad in the upper left, my mom next to it, my Uncle Ted, my Uncle Charles to the right, and down the lower left was my Aunt Ruth, and then Sybil in the middle, and a nice lady who was a friend of Sybil's who was invited for a Christmas party. Then we sat around the piano, always at Christmas time. Sybil would be playing her violin. I was playing the piano after Charles passed away, and my dad playing his tin can cello. My dad did play the actual cello, but on a camping trip years ago in the High Sierras, he found this old tin can and made a cello out of it in a campsite. And we had that every year for years. It was always fun. And it actually sounded pretty darn good. It was amazing how good that sounded. Well, finally, after Sybil was unable to take care of herself and it was decided to sell the house, we had to go through and give it a major cleanup. And we did. We painted it up. Contractors went through the whole place. There's the niche where the desk used to be. Right in front of it is where the piano resided. You can see the front entranceway there. A little powder room just off to the right of that front door. There's the dining area, and off leading into the kitchen area. And there's a wonderful slider going out into the patio there that was greatly enjoyed. The whole patio area was just terrific. There's a picture of that fireplace again, and you can see the little cabinet I mentioned earlier about where you could gain access to the wood. Well, my aunt was very much into the 50s, so when we restored the kitchen, we kept it that way. And old Gaffers and Sattler pink stove and a pink trim on the cabinetry. And this was looking towards the service porch from the teaching studio area. This is the entrance to the teaching studio as it ended up later on. There was a little bit of a modification later on. They made it a larger room than the original design that Richard Neutra did, and they added a little extra square footage to it. Another view of that same room. Hallway going down towards the master bedroom. And the little master bedroom there where she was a nice little area there where she could do her makeup and that sort of thing. Interesting, instead of having a bureau, they had a whole series of drawers to store all your personal things in. They're built in the bedroom. This is a view of the house from the backyard as it was finally finished up when we were finishing to restore it. Here's a planted area. Our dog was out there helping us. We just planted and she decided to go out there and dig up something. So anyway, you notice that the planter there was in the shape of a violin. That's the way the house looked when we finished it up. And then there was a big story. The house was sold, and I'll refer to my notes here just to be sure I get it right. We had it all renovated in 1998, and it was sold. And then it was resold several times. And then in 2003, the new buyers decided they didn't want the house. They wanted to tear it down and utilize the property to put in a brand new house. So the LA Conservancy, since the house had been registered, was very adamant about saving the Maxwell House from destruction. And they managed to fight it out for 5 years. And so in 2008, the house was finally sold on eBay for $1, with the understanding that the buyer would remove the house from the property. So the house was cut up into 3 different sections and moved to Angelina Heights, which is downtown Los Angeles near the City Hall, actually. And it resides on a lot there in Angelina Heights today, in very, very sad conditions, unfortunately. And that's what's been built in its place. That's 5,200 square feet of brand new contemporary house. That's what the lot looks like today. So in Angelina Heights, there's the Maxwell House as it resides today. Pretty sad. Vandalism has taken over. Not much chance that this house is ever going to get rebuilt, I'm afraid. That hole on the left is where the fireplace used to be. So there we go. Not much hope for the future, unfortunately. That's really the bitter end.
Well, thank you, Keith, for the social history of a house whose end is still not clear. We hope that somebody will take hold of it and give it new life. But when they do, they'll know the people behind it. And thank you for putting this together. And I will end the recording here.
My pleasure.